Now we're going to take everything that we've learned and put it to work with these final 3 videos in this series. This first one, we're going to tackle improvisation and how to begin, right? And again, this is something that I wish I was told when I was first getting into learning how to improvise solos. And essentially what I'm going to tell you is beginning is about simplicity, right? Start with just a handful of notes. Now, we'll get to that in a second, but we'll also want to talk about sort of what to unpack as far as when you encounter a situation where you're about to solo. So, for example, we're going to be using a backing track for these 3 videos, particularly one in the key of E minor. Now, this is something that's going to be relevant to the modes and the pentatonic scales that we've learned, at least a good chunk of them, because of the tonality, the backing track and the key that it's in. So it'll be a perfect little playground for us. But at the same time, too, we're going to talk about how to actually decide what scale to use and all that good stuff, and how to really just cut through all the noise and then just be in the moment and play some music, right? Which is what we're all trying to do. That's what it's all about. And I really like this backing track. In fact, I like everything that Elevated Backing Tracks puts out. He's great. Makes them really feel like songs, and they're just excellent. Perfect place to start when it comes to not just drilling scales and that kind of stuff, but actually learning how to truly create music on the fly. So this backing track is in the key of E minor, which should tell us one thing, right? The tonality is E minor. We already know E as far as like we've been playing all these modes and stuff in the scales in using that key, but we're going to be focusing on the minor tonality. So that narrows it down to Dorian, Phrygian, Aeolian, Locrian, a minor pentatonic, obviously. So right off the bat, just that right there is 5 scales that we can work with and try out and see how they work. So what I'll do is I'm going to play the backing track, and then I'm just going to run through all 5 of the scales, just up and down, just to establish the fact that they work. And then once we have that, figured out, then we're going to talk about how we can actually approach playing something truly musical. I'm going to start with E minor pentatonic. Here we go. Now let's throw in Aeolian. Now how about Phrygian? Nice, let's try Locrian. Ooh. We can rule out Locrian. So that's kind of a reason why Locrian is not as popular, because it's just a very niche mode that you really only use in very certain circumstances. And this is not one of them. So we can eliminate that. I don't know about you. Maybe you liked how that sounded. I didn't really like how that sounded. That doesn't really fit in with the type of musicality that I tend to go for with a backing track like this. So we're just going to focus on those 4, okay, as just like our little starting points. Like these are the frameworks of notes that we can have permission to use now that we know this is going to work over this particular backing track in the key of E minor. But remember, we're going to start simple. So starting simple really means starting with 1 note. We want to start with 1 note, and then let's graduate to additional notes in whatever given scale we choose among those 4, right? Minor pentatonic, Aeolian, Phrygian, and Dorian, right? I don't even think I ran Dorian when we were trying it out, but I'm pretty sure that will work. We'll try it out and find out for ourselves. It's really that major 6 that might only work in some spots. But anyway, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So if we're going to practice using 1 note, it's always good to start with the root note, right? So obviously it's in the key of E minor, so the root note is E. We want to start there because we know for a fact that is like 100% of the time E is going to work because that's the key, right? So that's our little safety net. Now, don't think of that as like it's supposed to be this uninteresting place to start because there's no tension. You want to try and really force yourself to make an E sound interesting or a root note sound interesting. So this is where timing, feel, guitar linguistics, all that stuff can come in. So I'm going to throw on the backing track. I'm just going to go between these 2 root notes, these 2 E's. E, E. So 7th fret on the A string, 9th fret on the G string. Those two E's, I'm gonna go back and forth between those, but I'm not gonna do it to where I'm just going, you know, I'm not gonna do that, but I'm gonna just go between those and really force myself to make them sound interesting. So let's see how it sounds. So right there, that root note worked just fine. I mean, for most of the time anyway, right? I was just trying to do some slides, some bends, little things to try and make it sound moody and atmospheric and somehow fitting in with the track. But it did give me a lot of intel. It did kind of tell me that, like, all right, it does want to go further than that. So let's graduate to some additional notes. So let's just do, let's say we got our root note, right? Let's add our minor third in there, right? Which is shared by a lot of these modes. And of course, in the minor pentatonic, got our minor third, then we got our 4th and our 5th. Let's have those in there. Plenty of room for some cool melodic content. So let's run the track again and then see what that sounds like. So what I was doing there was I was exploring how those notes worked with the backing track, right? With the chord changes. They seemed to fit pretty nicely, and then they were able to establish this melodic setting, you know? Those notes totally work. Just 4 notes, right? 4 out of 5 if we're talking minor pentatonic. So just those 4 notes worked fine, and there's all kinds of ways that we can play them. I was doing little bends, you know, vibrato, hammer-ons, slides, all those little guitar linguistics things, trying to keep the timing and the feel right, because with timing and feel, you establish those melodies, right? You give rhythm to your ideas, so you're not just going like in a static kind of, you know, you want to make them a little more interesting than that. So all those little things, even though they're subtle, they really make a big difference, and they pretty much showcase that you have that level of comfort, right? Or you're working towards that comfort to having some confidence in what you're playing. So being able to do that, just focusing on those little things, because trust me, if you were to take those away, you would absolutely notice. So that's the importance of those techniques, because as subtle as they are, you definitely know when they're missing. Okay, so now I'm gonna run the track again, and then I'm gonna just have all 4 of those scales to sort of pick from and just do whatever kind of feels right. But I'm gonna be deliberate, okay? Like, I'm not gonna be as experimental. Of course, you absolutely can take the time to try that, see which of those scales kind of work better, but you really don't want to think in terms of, okay, I'm using this scale, now I'm using this scale, like when you're improvising. As far as the end goal, that's not really where you want your head to be at. You want to be more melody focused, and whatever scale that happens to be, you know, you need to make that melody, that's more or less a secondary thought. Your initial thought should be the melody itself. So this is where we're going to go back to the idea of composing an idea in your head. Now that we've acquainted ourselves with the tonality of the scales that we're using and the backing track, let's try and come up with some cool melodies. So I'm going to throw that backing track again. I'm probably not going to sing them out loud, but I'm going to compose an idea and then play it out. So whatever you hear me play out loud, it was composed in my head first. And I'm going to keep them nice and simple. Dorian kind of worked there for a second. notice how the whole time I stayed within that single, octave, that general area that just covers just the bare minimum amount of notes, within the diatonic and the pentatonic scales. Because I really want to stress the point that you can get a lot of musical ideas just from one little region of the fretboard. And once you really exhaust, those ideas and you force yourself to continue to make it interesting despite your limitation, then imagine when you start to expand outward and you graduate to more notes and more octaves and more regions on the fretboard, it's just gonna sound that much better. And you're gonna have a much better idea on how to tackle it as opposed to just having all these notes and no idea what to do with them. But of course, this is but part one in this 3-part improvisation control little conclusion series we have. So in the next video, we're gonna expand on this topic even further. But for now, you have everything that you need to know in order to actually begin. So just use everything we've talked about, use that backing track, use those scales, and start there. Let that be your playground. And then when you start to really, once the gears start turning, it really doesn't matter what style, what key, what scale you're using, the same rules apply.